What up, y'all, and welcome to Moto Chapel. This is a segment on our channel where the open road intersects with our faith. Today, we're going to talk about seeds and how to be generous with those seeds, so welcome aboard. I grew up in rural western North Carolina, just west of Asheville. I grew up in a little community, a mill town called Canton, and as a kid, I never really understood the beauty in which I lived. In fact, I couldn't wait to get out of Canton. It was definitely a different pace of life. It was a slower pace of life. And because of that, I enjoyed very simple things. One of the things I enjoyed most was going almost anywhere with my Papaw. And when I was a kid, my Papaw had a black Dodge pickup truck. Now, I invite you to use the movie screen of your mind for a moment and envision this truck. It was a black step-side truck. It had some of the most modern conveniences of its time. Modern conveniences like an AM radio that played only Rush Limbaugh. It had some modern conveniences like a 255 air conditioning system. And of course, by 255 air conditioning system, I mean it had two wing vent windows just adjacent to the manual crank-up windows that you could open and adjust to flow air inside. And as long as you were running about 55 miles per hour, it was an effective form of air conditioning. This was the type of vehicle that had a button on the floorboard that you would press with your foot to switch between high and low beam headlights. And I would go absolutely anywhere my Papaw wanted to go. And I remember as a kid, one summer evening, he asked if I wanted to ride into town with him. And I, of course, said yes. And so I hopped up in the truck and we rode down a 2-lane country road. And as we were riding by a cornfield, he saw a friend of his out by his barn. And so we turned off of the paved blacktop onto a dirt road that led out into the far back corner of a cornfield. It was a dusty road that led to a barn-like structure. And there we got out of the truck and my Papaw talked to a fella that I only knew by the name of Mr. Carroll. We stood there inside his barn for a moment as my Papaw and he caught up and chit-chatted for a while. And at some point, my curious young mind asked a question. I said, Mr. Carroll, how do you plant all of this corn? It's a huge field. How do you plant all of this corn? Mr. Carroll reached into a bin nearby. He pulled out an ear of corn. He pulled back the hull and he exposed just the raw corn. He picked a kernel off of the cob and he said, well, you see, we pluck each and every one of these kernels carefully, and then we strategically throw them out into the field one by one by one. And I said, really? He chuckled and he said, well, no. He said, we put seed in that spreader over there and we pull it through the field and it broadcasts the seed out into the field. And he said something to me that day that I have never forgotten. He said, you can't be stingy with the seed. He said, you got to be generous with the seed. He proceeded to share that 1 bushel of seed could yield 170 or more bushels of corn. Now, I didn't think much about that story until a couple of years ago when I was reading through the Gospel of Mark. And I read in Mark's Gospel narrative in chapter 4 this story about a farmer who sowed some seed. And it said, Jesus began to teach beside the lake again. This is the Sea of Galilee. And such a large crowd gathered that he climbed into a boat there on the lake. He sat in the boat while the whole crowd was nearby on the shore. Jesus is been surrounded by this crowd of people, and so he gets into a boat and he rows out into this little cove. It's a cove that's very beautiful. Had the opportunity to sit on the banks of this very same spot, or what is likely this spot, a couple of years ago, a cove named Sower's Cove today. But it gave like a natural amphitheater kind of feel. So Jesus has moved out into the lake. He sat in the boat while the whole crowd was nearby on the shore. He said many things to them in parables, short stories that they would have related to or understood. It would have been things that made sense to the hearers in that day. And while teaching them, he said this. He said, "Listen, a farmer went out to scatter seed. As he was scattering seed, some fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on rocky ground where the soil was shallow. They sprouted immediately because the soil wasn't deep. And when the sun came up, it scorched the plants, and they dried up because they had no roots. Other seed fell among thorny plants, and the thorny plants grew and choked the seeds, and they produced nothing. Other seed fell into good soil and bore fruit. Upon growing and increasing, the seed produced in one case a yield of 30 to 1, in another case a yield of 60 to 1, and in another case a yield of 100 to 1. Jesus said, "Whoever has ears to listen should pay attention." I think what Jesus is sharing with us in this parable is that we should be generous with our seed, much like Mr. Carroll was saying about corn in that field in rural western North Carolina. He said, you can't be stingy with the seed. Jesus is essentially telling us the same thing. You see, I think what one of the things that hinders the church universal is we open our doors from 9 to 12 on Sunday morning, and we invite people to bring their soil to us. And if they're willing to bring their soil to us in our buildings or on our campuses, we will gladly sow some seeds. But Jesus is calling us to something different. Jesus says we should scatter our seed wherever we go. Now, of course, some is going to fall on the path and the birds are going to come and eat it. Some is going to fall among thorny plants and they're going to be choked out by the weeds. Some seed is going to fall into shallow soil and it's going to sprout up. It's going to look like an enthusiastic, fruitful growth. But when the sun comes out, when the going gets tough, it's going to get scorched because it didn't have deep roots. But some is going to fall in good soil, and it's going to produce much fruit. Jesus is calling us to scatter our seeds, to be generous with our seeds. And when we say seeds, we mean the gospel narrative, the good news of Jesus Christ. Jesus is calling us to spread that seed wherever we go and whatever we do, not just in our church buildings on Sunday mornings, but in our office environments, in our classrooms, when we interact with people in the grocery store or at the gas stations. Everywhere we go, we should be scattering seed of hope. We should be scattering seed of peace and love and goodness. We should be scattering the seed of the good news of Jesus the Christ, who came, who lived among us, who loved us, who died, who suffered, who was crucified for you and I, and who was resurrected, who rose from the dead. So wherever you go today, whether it's out on your bike, whether you find yourself in the grocery store, whether you find yourself at a party with friends, wherever you find yourself, may we all remember that Christ has invited us to be generous with the seed. As Mr. Carroll said long, long ago, you can't be stingy with the seed. So let's scatter our seed, whether it falls on the path, the rocky soil, the thorny soil, the good soil. Let's scatter our seed for the sake of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. Until we meet again, friends, let's keep them revved up, minds, bodies, and spirit. Have a great day.